controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are A$AP Science here to make things make sense.
Envy.
E-N-V-Y.
Wait, okay, so I need to talk. I think we need to start by being like, what's the difference between jealousy? Because it was all over the map for me, depending on the study.
I think for a lot of people, envy and jealousy can be the same.
But some would sort of be like, envy and jealousy is this. Like, for example, one said envy or jealousy is an example of the feeling evoked when someone is better off than you. Very simple. But then others were like, actually studies trying to literally show how different envy and jealousy are. So envy is the painful feeling of wanting what someone else has, like attributes or possessions. If you're jealous, you're feeling threatened, and therefore you feel protective, fearful of losing your position. And you're more likely to, if you're jealous, want to take something away from someone else rather than just want what they have.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I think colloquially people use both of the words in both of those ways. And so I think, I'm sure we should just say like we're talking about envy and jealousy, and even though there might be
but I want to focus on envy.
Yes.
And this one I thought was interesting. Envy was characterized by feeling like inferior, you're longing for something, you're resenting, whereas jealousy was characterized as the fear of loss. The fear of distress, and then it leads to anxiety and anger. So you're more like, it was starting to become a little clear with me on those. Like jealousy is when you're like, something's happened that's making you feel like you're going to lose something.
Okay.
Like whether it's a part of yourself, whereas envy, it's almost like you're sort of sat there below looking up, like, you know, you're below and you're trying to like long for it.
Okay.
Rather than like you have it and it's leaving you.
Okay. That's interesting.
It was like,
they're both either way very interesting emotions, very present, I think, for everyone. I have some studies that will touch on like the, of course, advent of social media and the internet playing such a big role in this these days. Excuse me.
He barfs.
Like we have to see other people's achievements and stuff so much more frequently than maybe we would have ever before. And that plays a big role. But
I can go into the evolution of it.
Sure. I mean, cool. Yeah, okay. Well, let's start there.
You mean what? You want to ask about our envy or something?
Oh, I think you gave a definition already, right?
Yeah.
Not to start a podcast with like,
no,
Webster's dictionary says.
Do yours.
No, I think I just wrote it occurs when a person's you lack another's qualities, skill, achievement, or possession and wish that the other lacked it.
Oh.
So oftentimes, but this, for me, a lot of studies, and maybe you're going to explain this too. Actually, there's two.
Benign envy.
Two different kinds of envy. Do we want to say about that first, or talk about the evolution of it?
No, talk about that if you want.
Okay, so there's two different types of envy, and what I found really interesting is that some languages, like Dutch, apparently have two different words for these different kinds of envy.
Wow,
so
ribbit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, bring that back up. So they have malicious envy. So there's a word for that, and that's when you want to bring somebody down. Like that's quote unquote better off than you, even at your own cost. So the desire to like take it away from them versus benign envy, which makes you aspire to be as good as the other person.
That's the one that you're striving for, benign envy, because I have other studies that are like, it can actually be a really good motivator, but there's a lot of factors that make something a benign envy. It's hard.
Yeah. And the research, despite making these two kinds of envy distinct, even benign envy is still not a pleasant emotion or feeling. It's not good inside of you, but they classify it separately because it's like, okay, well now I'm going to like try to be that person. I want what they have. I want what they do. And so now I'm changing myself instead of trying to change and tear them down.
Which is kind of makes sense. I feel like that's like a natural part of life. You're looking at everyone around you and you're kind of like, well, that person's life's interesting, so I would rather do things to be more like them. That person's uninteresting to me. Like it's really...
And the gap, so envy decreases in studies as that gap gets smaller and smaller. As you see yourself like closer to the person you envy, you feel less envious, which seems obvious. Obviously, like as you're like, oh, I'm just as good as them now. I'm not envious anymore.
Well, but I was going to say it at the end, but I could say it now because I think it's really juicy, which is they were like, envy is the number one way for you to understand what it is that you actually care about in your life. So if you were to ask someone, what do you value? They're going to give you like probably a BS answer based on the way that they were raised and what they were told to value. And they're like, although you're not consciously aware of it, whatever you're jealous of or envious of someone is the actual like it's deep in your unconscious telling you what it is that you value. So it was like,
I don't know if that resonates with me.
oh,
Only because I don't think that can't be true.
he's in denial. I'm kidding.
What I mean is, to me, envy is such a like ingrained emotion that you don't necessarily control. Of course, it's pointing to something. I think it's more societal, and you can often look at someone and you're conditioned to believe you want certain things. But sometimes it reminds me of like, I know I bring up chips a lot on this podcast, but kind of like, you know, when you have it and you indulge, it's like you want, if you are given the opportunity, you'll just binge on a food, right?
chips. Okay, chips.
Chips
Yes,
for
gotcha.
me. Could be
Okay, I was
cake
like,
for
where?
somebody else or
Yeah,
candy
yeah.
for somebody else, whatever. But to me, envy is like this emotion that's just like grasping for the things you want really bad. And I think you can have both sides of yourself. Like, I don't want to eat chips all the time, but if they're near me, I can't necessarily control myself. And I think that, I don't know why I'm comparing the two. Does this comparison make
Yes,
sense?
I
Like,
do, but
envy
I
feels
think-
sort of uncontrollable.
But-
it doesn't mean that my biggest desire in life is chips. Like, I would like to be healthy, but I can't always stop myself from eating bad
But I
things.
think it's like keeping your chips analogy. If they're in front of you and you're longing for them, it means you value chips. I think.
Does it mean I value? See, that's the
But-
word that's triggering me, because it's like I think I
that's-
don't have self control over it.
Okay, but I think that it doesn't. It's just one study, but it resonated with me because I think it's like, not to say you're in denial, but I think
Yeah.
it can be easy to be like, I thought it was kind of juicy
no,
because
you're
it's
right.
a little bit like calling out, because I think a lot of the things that people envy are maybe not like, they may be materialistic,
Right.
and like a lot of people don't want to see themselves as that, but it could show you the things that you're having a challenge with. Like, I was just thinking about like the gym. Like, I'm spending a lot of time going to the gym, so now I'm like envying people with like insanely beautiful bodies more.
Because you're around it and you're trying to.
It was just like, oh
work
my
out.
God, it's interesting. It's like, no, you're valuing the gym now, Greg, and you're valuing these things because
That's
you're
fair.
envious of. I just thought it was a really cool way to be like,
But which came first, the chicken or the egg, right?
it's not saying that. It's just saying it can be a really interesting indication of where your values
Yeah.
are lying.
Okay, that's fair.
Which I just is like, it's like, what do you envy? That could then indicate what do you value. If you are uncomfortable with that, then maybe there are changes you can make, or just like an
Yeah, that's
acceptance
fair.
about yourself. That's kind of interesting.
Maybe it was the word value that or like got stuck on me, because to me a value is like this deep-seated thing but values can change from year to year.
Yeah.
Like if you're saying you didn't always value like fitness, but now you do. And
That's-
so
and-
now you'll be envious.
Yeah.
But maybe 10 years ago you could care less
Yeah,
about that.
exactly.
So
what? Yeah, that's
I
what
guess
I'm
a
saying.
value is more transient. To me, sometimes there's this idea of like your core values are
Well,
the
that's
things.
what they were kind of calling out. They're like, it's so interesting because people have values that if someone says, what do you value? They'll say this, and this. And they're like, a really deep thing to do is be like, who and what do you envy? Because that might just be the truth of your values at the moment.
Yeah, okay.
Which is like, it's like a little bit
worth
intense.
facing,
It's worth facing.
like, facing
yeah.
it,
And
yeah.
like, hello, call the therapist. So the evolution of envy is like really interesting because unlike, aggression and like fear or fear is a better one. Like fight or flight response is like very understood. You fear something, your body does all these physiological reactions to truly fight it, to run away from it. Whereas emotions like jealousy and envy are like way more complicated. There's not like, you don't have envy for this completely obvious reason. So this study, I'll talk more later because they did this hilarious section about how evolutionary biologists are so over the top.
What do you mean?
And like do such insane, like the reason this evolved was because of this. And they actually made a fake study where they made all these fake evolutionary biology claims, and then all these like studies and scientists were like, yes, that's it. And like how they showed how like these really drastic hypotheses can like spread because they're really catchy and interesting, but they're actually not that valid. So they're trying to be like, this is going to be really hard to explain the evolution of envy, but we're going to try our best.
Of course, yeah.
So one of the questions they asked in this survey was to a bunch of people, are you more envious of your neighbor who has a bit more money than you, or of someone like Bill Gates? And so what they found is almost unanimously everyone chose their neighbor.
Yeah. That would be my instinct as well. It's like the person you know. I'm like, I don't compare myself to Bill Gates ever.
Yeah. And so they were kind of saying that like this makes sense when you think of like the hunter-gatherer vibe. Like you're envious of the people within your physical proximity.
Yeah.
And that you are kind of that benign envy thing. You're kind of looking around at people who are like you, who have a bit more than you. Mm-hmm. And they think it could be like a motivating aspect of being like, okay, if I could just change myself a bit. Whereas someone like Bill Gates, you're like, well, there's
no reference point.
There's no reference point. It's like,
we're not
and he's like a quote unquote genius. It doesn't like threaten you in the same way, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense because I mean, so much of evolutionary biology is about like how we fit into our communities, and like I don't know, it just makes sense that you would be looking around you, and even anecdotally, it's like if you're in a field and you work really hard or practice really hard, say we're like creators, YouTubers, as we got more popular, it was way more like that I would look at people who had around the same level of like viewers or subscribers
and
or those kind of
things.
Envy. And I stopped it's a bias where you kind of like stop looking behind, and it's a nice reminder sometimes when you're feeling envious to stop and go like, who's actually like kind of quote unquote behind me? I mean like physically, but that sounds like condescending. I don't mean it that way, because they're probably looking at me like, oh, if only I had that. Whereas you're always looking forward at who's in front of you saying like, if I just got that, I would be happy. But it makes sense that your perimeter or your radius for view is just like who's around
close,
you, socially or physically.
And they were like, envy evolved to motivate access to resources that are in demand by others in your group. So it's like, if you think about Bill Gates, it's like the level of prosperity, like envy wouldn't motivate you. Like you're kind of like, maybe I would just waste all my energy. Like if I even tried to be Bill Gates, I would just like hate my life. And there's just like no, whereas it's like the people around you is like what you're actually more in demand of. Then this was another one. So imagine a scenario, A, in which you see another guy or girl making love to another woman or man that you are attracted to and desire. Mm-hmm. So let's just do it for you. So you're gay. Uh-huh. You see another guy making love to a guy that you're attracted to.
Okay, like someone I have a crush on or something, and then I'm like, they're hooking up with someone else.
That's scenario A. No, it's just someone you just see another guy who making love to someone you're attracted to.
I'm like, then making scenario love, B, am I in their bedroom?
Yeah, you're watching them have sex. Scenario B, you see the same guy having even more passionate, like enjoyable sex with someone who you aren't attracted to.
Yeah.
Who are you more envious of? Unanimously, they chose the one who they were attracted to.
Of course.
So it's like you're actually jealous of that ranking, not the feeling that they're going through.
Correct. I see. You're jealous of that's because it's your context. I want that.
Yes.
And they have it. I could care less if I want bananas and they're loving apples. Yeah. It's like it's not about what they have. It's about what I want.
Which I thought was such a cool question. Yes. And they found out they're like, okay, so that obviously means that like it's not about the outcome. They did another one that was like,
well, it is about the outcome, but the word matters. It's not about the outcome necessarily for the person.
Yeah.
But it's about what they're getting.
Yes.
Related to you.
They did another one, which was like just asking straight men, science. There was like, a lot of straight men, but it was
ever heard of them? Like, not on this podcast.
That A, you could be the Dalai Lama, vastly happier, like on some abstract but very real scale, or B, someone like Hugh Hefner, who had limited access to attractive women. Who are you more envious of? And they chose Hugh Hefner.
You mean unlimited access? Is that what you said?
Yeah, sorry, unlimited access
versus the Dalai Lama.
So they were just sort of being like, you'd think that people would be like, I'm envious of someone who has this like what we all could see as like an insane internal happiness and contentment, but they were still choosing the person who had access to attractive people as who they envied more. And it's like, that is just so odd. And it was like,
that's
unanimous.
What makes me think it's such in the way that fear is this kind of innate, almost uncontrollable thing. It feels to me like envy and jealousy. And as I've read the studies, like it is obviously a very natural part of social behavior and human behavior and some other primate behavior. But it's like there is an element of it that's like quote unquote out of your control. It's like this response your body has that maybe for a reason that you don't understand, but it compels you to act in certain ways. Yeah,
the last one, and I wrote this as like why LA sucks. But it was like, there's a guy in Spain who's extremely similar to you in talent, looks, and capacity for work, but he's twice as wealthy as you. Or there's Joe, who's your neighbor, who's twice as wealthy as you. Who are you more envious of? And people chose their neighbor.
Oh, I was going to say, because he's
You were going to choose Spain?
Only because that person's more similar to me.
I know. Well, they were just sort of, this one was not as unanimous, but they were saying most people chose B and they think it's like, it's like
you're right.
It's
like Spain is so far removed from me. I
Yeah.
actually don't. I would only really be caring about the people I know. But what it made me think about was like when people get on Survivor that fit I'm like,
okay, wow.
they're
so
gay, they're whatever.
Envious,
I'm like,
yeah, no, you have a specific. So you're
like,
envious
I'm
of
not
people
envious
on
of
Survivor.
like the girls who get on Survivor. I'm envious of like the queer men who get on Survivor because I'm like, that could be me.
Yeah. No, that's different though because I think Survivor weirdly for you is the neighbor. Like it's
the
a
community.
Small, it's the community. Honestly, like
my community of Survivor, of which I've never been a part.
And also, it's like going back to the earlier thing. It shows you what you value. You value Survivor. You know what I mean? Like that's where your envy is lying.
That is the saddest part of my life, but it is the most true.
But the reason I thought about LA is like everyone talks about how like awful it is to live there because everyone's in the same industry, and it's like it's true. When we would go there for work, it's like the envy shoots through the roof because everyone's physically around each other. Doing the same thing.
Things, yeah.
If you like lived in like Vermont and then like flew and did your jobs and just like lived outside of LA, like you would just not have to deal with the same amount of envy.
Yes,
because it's like your neighbors are all actually doing similar things.
You have to it's like you're competing with them as well.
Yeah.
Like I feel so blessed that our friends could give a crap about what we do and certainly don't do it at all because then you kind of
don't
like
have envy.
You look at them
Yeah.
and if you're not that this only happens in LA. Obviously, if like you're in New York and you're an actor and you're competing with like so many more people than you would be somewhere else, like now your friends are actors, it will be harder to like appreciate and be happy for them unless you have a really strong friendship.
But the reason the reason I like New York so much more is that you could build a friend group in New York as like a really
much more
incredible
diverse
scientist and then have less envy because you hang out with all artists.
100%,
like there's just more diversity in professions, whereas in LA you can tell people are just like clamoring for this similar industry. And I just was like, okay, yeah, I do think people struggle with envy in LA more than probably other cities. And it's just like these questions were making me be like, okay, like geography is like important to envy.
Yes, but I think we can qualify that geography can also be digital geography.
Yeah,
right?
true.
Like,
who you
I
follow.
believe you're right that a physical geography is always going to play a stronger role, but so many people live in these digital geographies. It's like, did I invent that term? Okay. And your digital geography, like is the people you surround yourself with on the internet as well, or just the communities that you're in.
No, I'm not.
Like we have a digital,
but like for sure, that's like been said before. But like,
yeah, no, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, yeah, like I actually like it is interesting.
I think about it just because, of course, when I'm like thinking of, are our videos like successful? Are they reaching enough people? It's like I'm looking at the people in our digital geography. I'm not comparing. We don't have any friends in our lives that like create content. So it's like I'm looking at similar-ish people to us who make content to be like, are we like stacking up for ourselves and for other people?
Yeah. What are you like most envious of?
Well, like you're trying to get me to expose my deepest desires.
Well, no, I was saying
literally gay men on Survivor.
That's so interesting. That's a cool one. That's interesting.
I'm not that envious of them because I don't know them at all. I'm not really envious of them.
I know. I'm trying to think
very
of who am I
fleeting.
envious in my life. It's so high school. Like I could have done it so well in high school. I was so like panicked and envious.
Yeah, it's such a complicated emotion because sometimes it's the people you also love. Like
know what I'm envious of? People who are like aloof. Like I think that sometimes it's like because I'm such a people pleaser. This is like dark and deep, but I'm like I can't believe I have why am I saying that? But it's like when I'm always so aware of the way everyone else is feeling and trying to make people feel comfortable, I get really annoyed with people who aren't like that. And then I think sometimes it like leads to like deep down, it's actually an envy.
That you wish you didn't have to bear the cross of like being stressed about people feeling comfortable and stuff.
Yeah,
like
because it's also it's like
anxiety,
pretty.
right?
It's like it's pretty like not. It's not that helpful. Like it's helpful sometimes. I'm sure some people are like, oh sweet, like I appreciate that you're like,
of course,
but like not really. A lot of and then it's like people who are like kind of like aloof have obviously a lot of their own issues, but like my envy is there sometimes, just being like you're just like
can escape that feeling of
it's
carrying
very
the
like,
stress of everyone.
Yeah, and it's very like innocent in a way because you're kind of like you're just like. It's almost like they're present.
Yeah.
I'm envy of people who are just like present and don't care. I'm envy of people who don't give a fuck.
I feel it's weird because on the surface, my answer keeps changing in my head. Sometimes I think I'm envious of people. I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but there's some people who like are totally satisfied with their life and like their job. And
But
like,
are there?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
There's a range.
What? You mean like people who seemingly are?
Sometimes I feel like I always have to be chasing something else. And I'm like, sometimes I'll see people who have had the same job and they just have quote unquote a more simple life that I really wish I could just be content. But then at the same time I stop and I'm like, but I actually don't think I want that.
Yeah.
Like I maybe thought I wanted that, but I'm like, I think if I had that, I don't know. It's hard to know because my brain would just be like, no, I need another goal.
Yeah.
I need another thing to like try and
So
do.
you're envious of people who live a simple life and seem content.
Yeah, and are just like, I don't need to do more. I'm happy with where things are at. I don't need more, whatever, more friends, more money, more success, more anything. My life is like fulfilling the way it is. That may be an illusion. Of course, everyone faces, it's easier for me to look at someone and be like, everything's perfect in their life. And they're just like, content.
I know. But that's like a good point. That's like why envy is so interesting is it's making you realize that is an issue in your life. It's the constant need.
It is, but
more.
I don't, that's why I'm saying it's confusing to me because I stop and I'm like, I'm actually not envious of that because I don't think I want that. Like I do. And maybe this is me working through therapy. Like everyone is different and everyone can be the same.
Yeah.
And maybe it's conditioning, maybe it's trauma, maybe it's whatever, or maybe it's genetic. And like some people are just like more contented and some people are less contented. And I'm somebody who just has to like accept sometimes that that's a little bit a part of my personality.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we'll get to near the end about how to cope with envy is in these studies, an important one was like, you can't cherry pick your envy. Like you have to take it all. So like, if you are envious of that person with a simple life, then you have to take their 9 to 5 and they're maybe unable to go on the trips you go on. Or like you can't just choose that one part of their personality and then be like, but I want to keep everything else about my life.
100%,
is a really good practice for if you're envying someone and it's like you're having issues with it, be like, you're not allowed to just choose the one thing they have. Like for me, like their aloofness, you actually have to choose the rest, which is that actually a lot of people are annoyed with that person because they're not capable of making other people feel comfortable. Like people like having me around because I will make sure everyone feels okay.
Yeah.
And even though that's frustrating to me sometimes, if I'm actually going to follow through and be envious of someone who's like aloof, I have to take the fact that sometimes people are like, that person's annoying because they're not,
and
they're
many
thinking
more
only
things
about
too,
themselves.
Right? Like being aloof. Many people are aloof, like forget a lot of things and end up in situations.
I also like don't know where my keys are.
Well, you're like are a little aloof but in specific ways.
Like aloof, and that's what I mean. I'm like I also am envious of that. People who like know where their keys are. But I'm that. I'm not the fun aloof. I'm aloof
What's
for the things.
aloof?
I don't know. The fun aloof is when you just like IDGAF.
No, everything's good, everything's bad. Okay, everything there's a scale. Everything. Some things are just bad, I think, but like most things are a bit good, a bit bad.
And then I think, and then obviously back to like, I think envy can be a lot like social media. Bodies.
Before we go there, I wanted to get into a really cool study on primates, and you may have actually like seen this in the past, and it like upholds a lot of the things you were just saying, which I thought was fascinating.
Oh, okay.
So, okay, there's like these studies that have been done on monkeys, where they give them. If the monkey gives the human a stone, like they're in cages or whatever, they'll get a treat.
Sorry, they're in cages.
Like they're in, they're literally in cages. They get a reward. And usually that reward is cucumbers. And so they'll like get this monkey to give a stone, get a cucumber. And the one right beside it that it can see will get a cucumber as well. But then later they switch it where suddenly this one gets a cucumber still. But now this one, when it gets the stone, gives a stone, it gets a grape. And apparently monkeys go wild for grapes. Like apparently it's like the highest reward.
That's so cute.
And once you do that, the other monkey will stop performing in the same way. It is like basically annoyed and jealous that the other monkey's getting a better reward and will stop giving the stone. It will like its rate for completing the task. And they also then tested like, well, what if grapes are present but we're not giving it to anyone, just to see like, are the monkeys being greedy? Is that monkey going like, well, I saw grapes, give me grapes? No. If grapes are present but not given to any monkey,
it's fine.
It's all about what the other monkey is getting, changes their behavior. And so this has led them to believe, obviously, like that this is like envy is an innate thing about fairness and about like wanting to distribute things in a specific way. So what else did I write? Okay.
It is cool to know all these things because I think sometimes when people suffer from jealousy and envy, it feels like an out of control reaction. And if you can remember that it's just like
it is an important evolutionary thing.
It can help you be like, okay, like I'm not like, because it can also lead to murder. I know I brought that up.
There's extremes of everything.
No, but it's like actually like envy can drive people crazy. Anyways, continue.
Their takeaway in this was, so the researchers argued that without envy motivating our interest in making social comparisons, there'd be no reason to care about fairness and justice. So like envy is a social dynamic. Like you're looking at the community around you. If somebody has too much more than somebody else and it feels unfair, that like creates a dynamic in the group that is pushing, not only can push everyone to try and do more, or maybe it is like bringing them down so the group has more fairness in it to like have the success of the group rise. Do you know what I mean? Instead of like individuals.
Yeah.
But then it is interesting that you use the Bill Gates example, and it's almost like they're so far removed in their wealth and affluence that they've gotten out of the system.
Well, now we're talking microtween studies, but another interesting thing I thought, this study wasn't as good, but the one part I took out was like about materialism and how like essentially like benign envy might motivate people to improve themselves, which is like good, I guess. But like it also, when they think about it from like a capitalist perspective, it usually just means like buying similar products to people that they like have envied. Okay. And that malicious envy instigates like almost like buying things to spite someone else, like higher luxury goods over other people.
Yeah.
Whereas they were like, the benign envy might be like, oh my God, that's such a nice shirt. I'm gonna have that shirt. Whereas they were like, this is trying to like explain the envies. Whereas like malignant envy would be like, like that shirt is Adidas. Like I'm actually gonna go Prada.
Right.
And like wear Prada around you to be, And then they kind of like took it down this world where they're like caring about brands and materialism and value in products can be a sign of, and like almost like a trigger of envy. And I was like, that is so interesting. Like we're like, you can like link it to like climate change. Like they kind of did that. They're like, if you're like, we're in this consumer like issue right now with products, and like, it's almost like the idea of like valuing like reusing things and buying secondhand and stuff, they were saying could be an antidote to envy. Because if you sort of start to subscribe to the idea of like valuable clothes, valuable cars, valuable houses, wealth, you are like falling into the trap of envy. And I was like, that is so interesting, because so much of like Toronto, and like we had the opportunity to go out on King Street recently, where it was like the first time we'd ever done that, which is like this like bougie party street in Toronto. And you're just like, this whole thing operates on envy. It's like about who's sitting where, and like I think people subscribe to it because they just think it's like what like life is. But I really think that they're saying is like, no, if you subscribe to it, you're going to be in a lot more pain. There's like a way you can tap out of this fully, and it actually involves
maybe
being
not fully.
Sorry, not fully, but like it's like if you are actually like, I actually do care about money and material possessions and all these things, that's like buying the Prada is not going to make you feel better. It's actually just going to contribute to the fact that you're now more envious in settings. It was like complicated, but I was like, that's really interesting that like you might just be like, I'm having a good day, I'm going shopping. But it's like, it could end up being something that in the long run.
Yeah, but that can be expressed, I think, in any way. It doesn't just have to be buying things. Like you can express your envy through, I don't know that it's like, obviously buying things is more toxic in the way that it impacts the world on a greater scale, but like you can be envious in another way and try to get better at something, and that can still be just as toxic. Like by participating in that envy.
Yeah.
Like
what? Like
I don't know,
like
like
a sport?
Oh, that musician's better than me, I'm gonna like get better. Like, is that motivation now toxic? Like it's the same emotion.
Yeah.
I think the clothing thing is like a simpler thing because it's literally dealing with material goods. And we can also say like we live in a crazy capitalist society that's like destroying the planet. Okay, it's bad, but I think it's still the same emotion. and whether it's good or bad is like hard to quantify. Of course, it's easier to say, oh, but like practicing an instrument is a noble pursuit. But to me, it's the same underlying emotion that's pushing buying things versus getting better at a thing, I think. A couple of like interesting facts I came across is high self-control is more predictive of benign envy. So
yeah.
So in studies, if people have self-control, they're more likely to be like, okay, I have autonomy. I will try and get better at a thing versus like having low control is more associated with malignant.
Yeah, they were talking about impulsiveness as like an issue with envy.
And then malicious envy was more linked to fear of failure, and benign envy is more linked to expectation of success. So, so if you think you're like someone who's like, I think I should be successful, you're more likely to have benign envy and like try and make yourself better.
I think I should be successful is benign versus.
And then fear of failure. People who are afraid to fail are more likely to want to bring other people down.
Oh, that makes sense because they're like not able to
themselves out there. And then one other really interesting thing I thought is like admitting you're envious is breaking a social norm.
Yeah, and that's the number one key to alleviating envy is actually just admitting it and talking about it. That's the classic therapy thing, like in awareness and communicating. Like literally, if you talk to people about your envy, like the way that people respond is extremely positive to the point that it might go away. But they said no one, like people are so afraid to talk about it.
Even in brain imaging studies, they can see that people are suppressing the parts of their brain.
Okay, so what are we actually envious of? Like we can't even say it.
It's like so hard to say. It's so hard to admit. It's so vulnerable. And it's like it destroys your positive self-image of yourself to show that you're like, envious of someone having more money or something. But it's like not only will people spontaneously deny envy or suppress overt acts of envy, but they may also literally change their inner thoughts of feelings. And when they do neuroimaging brain studies, those brain regions associated with controlling emotions are activated in the presence of superior others. So it's like you're even more like, I'm now they're like, turn it off. Like, don't feel that because it's actually socially unacceptable to be
That's so
envious.
hunter-gatherer vibes. We're officially Joe Rogan podcast. Only talking about that. But that is so interesting. It's like if you're around someone that you envy, to be like, I envy you is so hard, whereas I can imagine you're like, oh, actually everything's so fine, kidding, like you're the worst, like you're so like I can just imagine what people do, and it feels like
it feels like a negative quality to say like I'm feeling bad because of your success. It's not a nice like thing to have to admit, right? It's almost it's embarrassing to be like you're having a really happy experience and I feel bad. And that's like,
no wonder everyone hides that. But then they're saying it is really important to talk about. Because,
of course,
because also the person would probably start to be like, well, here's like why this was so messed up. And like, but like, obviously you don't want to like yuck someone's like yum. Mm-hmm. But it is really interesting. I'm trying to like think of like examples of. Well, I was just watching the Pedro Almodovar movie and I just remembered the girl said, I really envy you. You two are so close. Like she just said that in the movie last night about the two sisters. And I just remember being like, oh, she admitted her envy in this way. That was like nice. And they kind of were like, I don't know. It just was like a trigger for me being like, oh, that she said, I envy you too.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I think about envy. And
I think it can be used as a very positive thing. And if you come to terms with it, you can express it in a meaningful way that's not yucking someone's yum.
Yeah, and then they like
to say it in that way doesn't make the other person think, oh, you wish I didn't have this close relationship. It's more like the benign envy. Admitting benign envy is more positive. Yeah. Because you're like, I just wish I had what you had and I'm jealous of that. But if you say it in a way that's like, because it's beautiful, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think
because I want to be better than
what
you.
is like our deepest, darkest. I'm just like thinking of like, I'm going to like the gym, literally like the hellish place on earth called Equinox, and picturing like there are just like, literally almost like the trainers at Equinox, like when they come in the change room, I'm just like, oh my God. Like it is envy. I'm like, that is the most like beautiful, insane body ever. And then sometimes like I'll literally listen to them talk and I'll be like dumb as fuck. Like shut my locker and like go, like I'm like
trying compensatory.
Like I'm almost like building up this story in my head about how like if I were to meet them, I probably wouldn't be like, oh, I'm so envious of your body. I'd be like, in my head like, oh wow, it's too bad that you like are dumb as a brick. Like I just feel like my body would create some other
Yeah, I think that's
thing,
normal.
which is like so rude. It's like I don't know any of them, and I'm so sorry if any of you are
Yeah, and
listening,
deep down, your biggest fear would probably be meeting them and they're amazing and so introspective and so smart, and you'd be like, but then maybe you'd see them more as a whole human as well, and be like, actually, that's really cool that you have it together, but it might be difficult to find out someone you're envious of actually also is like a good, good person.
And there's something definitely about like internal versus in-group, out-group. Like they're all straight, which I sometimes feel like
on the outside.
I feel like there's one that I think might be gay, and I think I'm like more aware of their body or whatever, like more like
that's
envious.
I think like we should talk about potential solutions.
Oh, well, it's to like admit it, to talk about it.
Okay.
To not just cherry pick the things you're envious of someone. You have to think of them as a whole and be like, do you actually want all of them, or do you just want that one thing?
Yeah. That one other thing I came across was like, you have to treat yourself like a child. Like when a child is like playing with toys and doesn't get something they want, they lose their mind. But as an adult, you go like, well, you can't always get everything you want. Like it's their turn to have it or to play with it. So like trying to remember like that's a philosophy for yourself as well. Like you actually can't have everything. That's not a meaningful life to have everything. And it's maybe better to focus on your own strengths, like pump yourself up, right? Like you all stop looking at the thing that you have a deficit in potentially, and try and like inflate your mind in the ways that you are strong.
Yeah, I remember like the first time like I left university, and like my one friend like got a job, and I got so envious. Like it was so weird because he was like, I got a job, and we all like went for drinks, and I was just like, I'm gonna kill myself. Like it was just like so crazy because like that's so interesting, like that 21-year-old age where it's like now you're out of university, time to become a professional. Like it like shattered my world to be like, wait, I'm like going to a teacher's college. I'm like like I'm not like making the income, and like I just remember it threw me off so much. It's like, wait, I should just, and seemingly everyone else at the drinks was happy, but maybe we were all panicking. No one said anything. I didn't say
to be like, oh my gosh, like they're kickstarting life, and like
and I didn't have it in me, but I bet if I was like, oh my god, I'm actually like so envious, I'm kind of freaking out, I bet we all might have admitted it, talked about it. Even he might have been like, I'm freaking out that I have to work. And like when I look back on that, I was like, that was, to go back to what I said at the beginning, envy really does show you what you value, and it's transient. Like I don't value that anymore.
Right.
It does. Like if my friend gets a job, I'm like, actually like slay. Whereas at the time, because it was that like time when everyone's supposed to get, there's a lot of
trying
pressure.
To figure out how to
like
become
early
an adult.
20s, like people in their 20s, like probably deal with a lot of envy. But then when now that we're in our 30s and everyone has their thing, and you actually realize like jobs are so boring and like whatever, there's like, envy has morphed and my values have morphed. But that was a time I remember feeling like I know exactly where I was when he told me, and just like, oh my god, awesome. Like just like such a dark feeling because it threw me off. I was like, wait, why?
I think it's a really good strategy, and I've heard this in like the happiness lab and stuff as well, to often like think of yourself when you're 70. Like if you, even right now at your age, think of your 16-year-old problems. It's easy to be like, oh, I was like having all these crazy emotions for things that don't quote unquote matter to me at all anymore.
Oh my god, speaking of Usher, I remember the first time I like saw a 6-pack on someone in like grade 7, and I had like almost threw up. I was so envious. I was like, wait, we can have those? Like I thought only like Usher could have those.
But okay, think of that then. If you're having like envy around like body stuff, it's like when you're 70, you're going to look at yourself now and be like, I should have been so proud. Like, not that bodies matter that much, but like you're going to look back no matter what and be like, wow, I was so youthful, but I was so focused on other things. Why didn't I just notice what I had? And I think that's a useful technique for like all sorts of emotions. That's my number one thing. Number two, I think it's also important to just accept like fear is a useful tool to protect us, and so is envy. But we live in a society where those things get triggered a lot. And so
you mean like Instagram and stuff?
Yeah. And just like trying to like remember like it's okay to be envious. Like this is part of human nature.
Yeah.
But if it's like causing you, if it happens to you a lot, then maybe you need to work with a therapist or a doctor or someone.
Yeah.
If there's like a lot of internal struggling, like there are some associations with like people who are depressed having a lot more envy. So like there may be other things going on in your life that might be envy, might be not like the base of it, but it might be getting triggered because of a different condition.
And I see something, I think that says low self-esteem, because that was coming up too.
Yeah, it says like the two main factors that make you more vulnerable is having low self-esteem, and then something called deprivation intolerance, which was simply just like the inability to not bear getting what you want. But I don't really know like much about that. So
I'm adding self-esteem as an episode because I'm like, even when people say low self-esteem, I'm like, what does that mean? Because doesn't that
like
seem like
low
everyone has
right?
like some version of it, and some like, I mean, yeah, I guess I just feel like self-esteem is something that like,
it's fascinating.
Everyone is gonna.
And are there like real techniques to like improve your own self-esteem?
Yeah, and it's like, it kind of reminds me of envy, where it's like people don't talk about it enough, in the sense that like you can have having low and high self-esteem both seem like weird and bad. Like it's like an unspoken thing.
Yeah.
And I actually have zero idea. Like sometimes I guess when people like act out in certain ways, I'll be like, oh, they have low self-esteem. But I actually like don't have that thought like very much, considering how many times I think
how much
other things
is,
about, and how much it might be impacting. And then even just being like, it's like, I think I have low self-esteem sometimes and high self-esteem sometimes, but I'm sure I want to be more cognizant of like when that is.
Yeah, it's so many emotions. I mean, so much of therapy can be that, is like learning to just clock when things are happening and then building up techniques to manage those emotions that are perfectly normal, that lots of people have, and just like working through it. And like I said, if it's on the extreme end where you're always facing these emotions, then there probably is like bigger, maybe more help that you need.
So you're like, your biggest envy thing is like survivor?
No, it's actually not like that. I don't actually know. Like I do have envy, but I'm not. I think my coping strategy with envy is to like block it out, which is not necessarily healthy, but it in some ways maybe is, where it's just
not
like
lean into it.
Well, it's like to hide myself from the people I am envious of. I don't want to look at the people that I have jealousy or envy of. Like
you could like pretend they don't even exist.
In a way, I think that's what
like
my
mentally
brain does. Yeah, or just.
But what if it's like your friends, or it's never your friends?
I wouldn't say it's never, but I don't think I have that much envy around my friends.
Yeah,
because now at this
really
age, I feel like most of my friends are people who I just want to be so successful. Do you know what I mean? Like nothing that they would do. Of course, maybe if envious in the less like toxic way. Like, of course, I'll be envy of like a friend's relationships or their love or like things that are wholesome, that I would be like, of course, I would want that. Like they have a beautiful relationship with their sister or something, you know. Like, I don't mean that I don't. I just mean like seeing like some sibling relationships is like, wow, of course I could be envious of that, but it doesn't like cause me pain. Yeah, does that make sense?
I mean, that is probably helpful that we don't work, like all of our friends have different jobs, which is probably really great.
Yeah, I think it helps that we don't have to compare ourselves.
It would be really hard working in everyone in the same field. People probably have maybe a lot of envy at work. People getting promotions and stuff. We don't have to deal with that.
I think a lot of my envy is like I don't know. I have to think about this more, to be honest. I was just going to say like I just like live in my own little bubble sometimes. So I'm sure envy triggers me, but then it like always expresses as just like I do think most of my envy is probably benign, which is not, I don't think that's necessarily healthy. It goes back to like being a perfectionist and needing to like then like obsess over things and spend so much time on things. And that,
but you shutting like the idea out is like interesting, because that's also very you. It's like it's a coping mechanism that's like
just
probably
like, put it away, close the door, don't look at it.
It's done good
ignore
in your life, and it like anything. It doesn't sound like good, but it's like it probably is good in the sense that like you don't have to feel that much envy.
Yeah, I'd rather ignore things that cause me envy, I think.
Yeah,
because I don't have like a successful internal mechanism to deal with them.
I think I'm the opposite. I think sometimes if something makes me envious, I panic and I like try to figure it out. Literally in a crazy way. Like thinking about just like those, I know I keep talking about the gym, but it's just like where I feel like it the most. Like I kind of think about them a lot. Like I'm not shutting them out. I'm like, they're here. The trainers are here. And I'm like, they're assholes.
It's so funny, yeah. Like, I do not have envy at all over like gym bros, but maybe if there's somebody who was like quote unquote like me, who had a similar body to me, who suddenly is really fit, I'd probably have more envy around that. But if I see like a jacked guy at the gym, I'm just like, oh well, he's.
What about like bar settings? I'm always so drunk that I'm not. I mean, that's probably why people drink when they go out. It does turn off envy. I bet there's going out sober probably is like your envy's everywhere because everyone's dressed up. There's VIP booths. There's something about the idea of partying that I think, and actually also even with you, like you're funny. Like sometimes with partying, like you don't want to go into a party environment where you are uncomfortable.
Yeah,
feel, like you know what I mean. Like I feel
definitely have a ton of anxiety, and maybe that's masking envy in some ways. Like I don't know, but like most of my problems come back to anxiety.
Yeah,
but I don't exactly know like the interplay between those two things.
Yeah,
like if it's because of envy or I don't know. Envy doesn't like almost every moment in my life I can link back to anxiety, but I don't think about envy that much.
Yeah, it's an interesting emotion though.
Yeah, I want to think about it more because I am like, it's harder in the middle of a podcast to like bring examples to my brain.
I just like, keep thinking about like two
Obviously,
hot trainers that actually I'm
envious.
not that envious of. I just like want to blow them.
Yeah, and I've worked through lots of envy with like social media stuff, like through the years, like looking at peers and.
But you're also like so good. You're like, no, and then you just like log off and you're like, I'm actually not doing Instagram.
That's what I mean. But that was probably because of that.
Yeah.
A mix of anxiety and envy and being like, then I'm just not doing this.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying is good. But
it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we should move on.
Move on or finish? Oh yeah, finish.
Yeah, just I mean like
this section.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
Yeah. This is long. Okay, we'll end the envy section here, and then we'll go into what's next week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for the viewers who are watching, thanks for watching, and BRB.